We're gonna see Piers Morgan calling Trump mentally unstable, including he's arguing with the Pope, which is awesome to think about. And Tucker Carlson and the U.S.-Iran war blockade. So we're gonna cover a little bit about the war that everyone's talking about. Apparently, something happening. I don't know. We're gonna see how unhinged he's going. We're gonna see if he went full white man, if he's like big booty Latinas, you know what I'm saying, going crazy type shit. We're gonna see exactly what he's doing. Um, but we're gonna see exactly the Iran perspective, arguing with a religious leader across the ocean, and then everyone remembering he doesn't really believe in God.
Did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Christ?
Well, it wasn't depicted. I did post it, and I thought it was me as the doctor.
You don't.
Classic, by the way. If anyone knows a religious scientist, seeing him as a doctor means you don't believe in Jesus Christ as a magical figure that causes miracles like a magician, but rather you see them as a figure of someone who's like a super intelligent person who healed people with basic medicine, and then that medicine added on to like the prosperity of society, building a civilization. So he's just mocking religious people as a whole. He probably despises that people make him pray sometimes, but it's like the only time he gets peace and quiet. So.
It's a distraction. It's a distraction. I just don't care.
As a
What I
Catholic,
care
you
is that
don't
the
care?
intersection.
Galatians 6:7 says, God will not be mocked.
The remedy is not 25th Amendment. The remedy is Congress.
Pope Leo's boss got executed and came back from the dead 3 days later. He's not afraid of a Truth Social post.
We have a one-man rule, and the one man happens to be crazy.
You block my ships and I'll block yours. That's the upshot of the US president's latest Iran war gambit. A US naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is now in force. It will not reduce the global cost of oil and gas. In fact, quite the opposite. But it may stem the steady flow of cash flooding into Iran's coffers, one of the most perverse unintended consequences of the conflict so far. Perhaps surprisingly, in current circumstances, President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio spent Saturday night at the UFC in Florida. It's fair to say Vice President J.D. Vance got the short straw, fresh from trying and failing to save Viktor Orban's campaign in Hungary. He spent 21 hours in negotiations with the Israelis in Islamabad.
The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms.
Okay, first of all, for the record, if no one accepts their terms after just completely destroying bridges and threatening to destroy nuclear plants and selling filtration places for the water, I forgot his name. But if you just keep killing the people and none of them capitulate, you didn't send your point across, and they're not exactly seen as intimidated. You completely fell flat on your goals on trying to conquer them and change their perception of reality. And seeing as they're getting ready for a draft for a lot of people who signed up for like financial aid or any sort of social benefit, these people aren't exactly ready for the next idea of what it is to conduct warfare, especially if they don't get approval from Congress. Congress is gonna have big issues with this because I believe I might have to do research, but let's see. If Israel goes to war, does the U.S. have obligations to support? See if there's some sort of law. The U.S. has no formal treaty-based obligation to enter war on Israel's behalf, but U.S. law mandates maintaining Israel's qualitative military edge (QME) over regional threats. This policy ensures consistent military aid, weapons, and intelligence support, effectively making the U.S. So they're just going to support them unconditionally, which explains why we couldn't cut off the bill recently from funding. This is a big, 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 big fumble by the American Congress. The Democrats have like no power at all. They're not exactly enacting their strength. Not a great discussers of like ending it. They can't really get to these guys because they're discussing in like pure Darwinism. And Darwinism means they only listen to the strongest opinions on how to solve this through means of war and strength. And if they just want to say no war, no war, no war, they know they're not talking to anyone serious. So it's unfortunate. It looks like a very deep divide inside of the House or the Senate. we're not going to see an end to this war because they're still calling it an operation to avoid any sort of arrests. But if they shut it down and they leave because they need 30 days to end the operation, they can just revamp the operation again and just keep going. So the war can go endlessly as a sort of like an executive's war that never ends. So it's funny when he's just shit talking the Pope online too, by the way. Because the Pope said war's bad and that it sent anger to the Christians who left the church a long time ago and told pretty much the Pope to go fuck themselves, which I think is hilarious because if you understood a Christian's perspective, like if you went to church and spoke to them, they do not respect the Pope. They respect them out of just pure decency. Like, cool, you like the cross, dude, also? That's awesome. But a lot of Christians abandoned that for science a long time ago, which is why their jets go brr. You know what I mean? So you're gonna have to be very careful when discussing with Catholics when they get offended and forget we're not in a theocracy. So the morality discussion's happening. However, no one even likes Gandhi because they said he touched kids and did some weird stuff too. So all their heroes are oftentimes just dethroned and just called like gross. So the Pope is probably going to get called a pedophile, and the Vatican's like helping pedophiles, which was the Democrats' argument point, by the way, for a while. But now it's suddenly the Pope matters, so it's very interesting. They're just flip flopping who's bad, who's good, who's bad, who's good, and none of them are ending the war. None of them have the power to end the war. There seems like there's no real inspiration to stop the protesting because the protesting itself is stagnated by people having jobs and having to go get more work and like survive, and while everyone's just going homeless. So everyone back home's just like suffering from the basic hegemonic control that's ruining people's lives. No one's helping anyone at home. Everyone's just betraying each other. The Republicans are cashing out like never before. And anyone's opinion about this is probably just mediocre, or it's just a continuation of just Darwin principles where you're just going to have to discuss how the strongest people enact the will of the people because you're just going to end up at the end of the day similar to a tribe. You're going to side with the biggest leader with the biggest spear and the biggest body to fight off the lions or hyenas or whatever live threat there is in the predator jungle. And the people who pretend to go no more war, don't stop or stop fighting the people on the outside perimeter are just going to be seen as unrealistic by the Republican standard, which is why the Republicans' perspective is lost on a lot of people. That okay, we started this war, but if we just end it, people are going to die more now, which of course is their mess up, but it's still the American people's mess up for having the Democrats who are not strong enough and the Republicans who can do what they want as they please. So it's both of them at fault, really, but they can't really take the accountability in that because I believe that the Democrat Party is waiting to take over this war and just continue it under the premise of they have to because no one wants to talk to them. And they just blame the Republicans and the Republicans blame Democrats. Meanwhile, Democrats are going to pull them all back and try and restrain them. I do believe that ending this war would put Israel at some sort of disadvantage, which a lot of people say good. But the second you give them the victimhood they want, they're going to have the support of the Democrat Party pretty quickly, which is the part of where no one really understands how to stop a war, stop a genocide, because it'll just revamp the support, and then you gotta wait till it comes down again because that's a new Republican administration, and it's just gonna continue on forward. You're not slowing the march of the death of the Palestinians. You're not ending the war of Iran. You're just adding new strategies within the Congress. So they predict when the next group that comes in and tries to say no war, and they fail the people and nothing's changing. No social benefits are actually being enacted because the same way you try to stop the war, they're going to stop the social benefit. They're just going to pull you back, and then they're going to put in a Republican, and then the Republican's going to march forward again. You don't have really any power when that same system that prevents you from stopping the war is the same system that prevents you from actually getting any social benefits in, which is why it's a very difficult process to really start to understand their mentality, because again, their mentality is just a continuation of doing what they want when they want.
Well, the biggest red line is Iran's uranium stockpile. 6 weeks and $30 billion worth of war have not changed Iran's nuclear potential. There's also no agreement on toll-free access to the Strait of Hormuz and on funding proxies like Hezbollah, without which it's extremely hard to argue the US has achieved anything much at all. Meanwhile, President Trump has added several new fronts in his war of words. Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens and Alex Jones were all savaged as low IQ losers in a Truth Social rant against his supporters turned critics. Carlson responded in a BBC interview.
I feel sorry for him, as I do for all slaves. He is not free in this moment at all to do what he thinks is best for himself or his country.
What do you mean?
No, he's not free. And we learned that yesterday when Donald Trump announced a ceasefire, clearly with relief. and made its terms, or most of its terms, public. And then that ceasefire ended within 2 hours because Israel intentionally violated the terms.
Well, last night, Trump turned his attention on an even bigger target. The Pope, His Holiness, has taken a not unreasonable position on the Iran war, namely that threatening to destroy civilization is unacceptable and that God doesn't like war. The president responded by saying that he doesn't like the Pope. And then, a move that angered even some of his most loyal supporters, Trump posted this image of himself as Jesus Christ. Now, plenty of people have been pointing out to the president that the religious fanatics led by a divine strongman are supposed to be on the other side. Well, just before we came on air, Trump deleted the image of himself as the Son of God, which is about as close as he's probably ever got to a genuine apology. Professor Jeffrey Sachs and a stellar panel are standing by, but we begin tonight in Beirut, where all the talk of a ceasefire feels a very long way away. Yalda Hakim is an award-winning Sky News anchor and host of the World podcast and joins me now from Beirut. Yalda, welcome back to Uncensored.
Thanks so much for having me, Piers.
Well, I'm trying to get my own not quite so massive brain around all this and struggling a bit. So I thought, who better to ask than the reigning Royal Television Society Network Presenter of the Year, which brings with it an assumption that you're going to give me some answers. What is going on with this war? Because I cannot make head nor tail of it.
Yeah, I mean, you and perhaps the rest of the world, Piers, because it would be a fool's errand to try and figure out what Donald Trump is thinking or what he's likely to do next. But I think what we can see about what's happened over the course of the last 24, 36 hours since those talks took place in Islamabad is that Donald Trump is trying to continue his pressure tactics. So he's basically hoping that Iran will cave to American pressures and that they will surrender. But that is, frankly, what the US president and the American administration has hoped for since February 28, that Iran would cave or surrender or tap out. And frankly, they haven't, because as many of your guests have said over the last 6 weeks, for the United States, this is a war of choice. But for Iran, this is about survival. For the Iranian government, the authorities, the regime there, this is the one point of victory for them is to stay surviving as a regime. And they probably have come out of this bruised and battered. And we know that the United States, of course, is a superior military force alongside Israel. And they have hit the IRGC hard, their military facilities and missile launches and their missiles. But the asymmetric war seems to have been won by Iran. And so, you know, while many would say that the talks that took place in Islamabad just a couple of days ago failed or collapsed, from the Iranian perspective, the 70-member delegation that they took was met by quite a high-level delegation from the United States, led by J.D. Vance, a skeptic of this war and a skeptic of forever wars. So for him to stand alongside the parliamentary speaker, who isn't just any parliamentary speaker, he is perhaps one of the most senior members now of the Iranian regime since they took out the supreme leader and various other top leaders. That was quite an image. And so while the talks haven't necessarily gone anywhere at this point, that image that we saw is historic.
Ultimately, though, if this all ends with the regime remaining in place, albeit with different people at the top, but all from the same regime with the same ideology, if the enriched uranium remains buried underground and the Americans and Israelis can't get their hands on it and the Iranians don't surrender it, and the Strait of Hormuz is now established as an incredibly effective strategic weapon and Iran maintains some form of control over it, it's very hard to see how President Trump claims any real tangible victory here, and how the Iranian regime doesn't emerge, not just surviving, albeit with its military smashed up a bit, which it clearly has been, but actually possibly emboldened by all this.
Yeah, I mean, Piers, we now live in a world where if the Americans and the Israelis do something that Iran doesn't like, it'll just close down the Strait
Right.
of Hormuz again, and this was not the case 6 weeks ago when this war began. So they do now have something that's a huge leverage that's basically put huge pressure on the global economy. And so in many ways, they are already emboldened by what's happened. If you think about the negotiations that took place 6 weeks ago before this war began, and don't forget, the Iranians and the Americans were talking. They were in nuclear talks 6 weeks ago. And then, of course, they say they were attacked, and they were attacked by America and Israel in the middle of those negotiations. They've now come out of this, like you say, smashed. But in many ways, they have the kind of leverage that Donald Trump is, frankly, pulling his hair out, saying, open the damn Strait of Hormuz. So what we saw in those negotiations that took place in Islamabad was, although J.D. Vance came out and said it was about their nuclear program, they basically talked about money, ships and the uranium, because these are now the big talking points for the Americans. And they're trying to put pressure on the Iranians. But the Iranians, frankly, have all the time in the world. They're in no hurry here.
Right. And then you've got, as part of this asymmetric war, you've got the attacks the Iranians have made on their neighboring Gulf states, which I think the scale of it has come as a massive shock to those Gulf states. I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years, as have you, traveling around the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. There was a real sense of dynamism about the region, a real conviction that they were moving inexorably from an economy based around oil, which is obviously slowly running out, to an economy based around tourism and sport and entertainment and all these things. And the big sales pitch was, come to all these states because it's safe, it's sunny, you're going to see great sport, great entertainment. We're letting tourists come now, come and live here. And many people were. But in the last 6 weeks, you've seen this slam shut as a business model that's working right now. You see many people, expats who've gone and lived there, leaving. Who knows if they go back? Tourism is pretty well collapsing. Real concerns, I would imagine, for the Gulf states about what this means for their economies going forward. But what does that also mean?
The problem with shutting down the Strait of Hormuz is the oil will go up. However, the people who have continuously been subjugated to pretty much unrestricted access to their lands through drone strikes, airstrikes of just regular capacity, ground invasions, special operations, psyops, dethroning people, regime swaps, the associated identity of just constant propaganda that they're all just terrorists and the worst people on the planet is essentially the only thing that has a lot of these people in the Middle East not really caring because they had no choice in this the entire existence. So the continuation of a war with a Western imperialist empire, it essentially does not matter to them on the ground because they already know what to expect. Most of these people are probably so oppressed that they're just barely happy to get the bread that day. And a lot of these people in America are confused, like, what if Netflix shuts down? Or what if, like, the traffic goes up and gas goes up, but in other countries it's just like, oh, okay, so we're like losing maybe 10-50% to mass starvation. We might be losing a huge amount of regular sales, but that sales is all right because I have the bare minimum. I prepared for this. Similar to how when terrorists would take over, it's like an American multicam guy. They would get all their food and water ready because they know certain roads they can't travel. They know that certain people they can't talk to anymore. They're on a hit list. They're going to be killed off. A lot of these guys are already prepared for the seasonal invasion. So the seasonal invasions of the white man coming down of their supremacist mindset, killing people, spreading propaganda, telling you that you're a lesser being, and then increasing the oil prices is probably already made in the foundation of their local governance to where the actual government itself probably has precautions on how to help people in the society when the oil gets restricted. So judging from where all these guys are getting their oil, something tells me that they're not low on oil, but they're low on the trade of the oil. But that trade of the oil has always been something you can't depend on because that's the main thing they usually cripple in a nation when they want to invade and attack it. So a lot of these people are on a very basic, I believe, an agrarian economy. Their tourism has never been high because they've always been seen as a lesser person and an inferior species. And the whole conceptualization that they run on oil is kind of the joke because they get great money out of it, but they're too busy like repairing a blown up building or a bunch of roads that got destroyed by a bunch of proxy wars combined with American intervention that the majority of the ones that are affected have already expected this with tons and tons of war. Saddam Hussein was probably a warm up. They knew one day that would be one of the main contentions, one of the contentious issues in the area. So I believe that a lot of this white man's perspective, which this is an Englishman talking to another white woman in a land they probably don't come from, about just their politics without understanding the local areas of that which they are discussing, have always expected some sort of intervention that would ruin their lives or their economy. And because of that, they have probably a lot more cash on hand, gold, or resources to sell off and make money off of in case of an emergency. Because I know, for one, I had some emergency money. I haven't been able to find a job in a while, so this is like my entertainment for now. But for the most part, most people expect to go homeless and then depend on some form of governance to support them. Out there, they probably don't even have the basic support. So they just accept that God wants them dead and they starve to death and they just get killed off en masse. No one really pays attention unless like some white vlogger goes over there with their camera and says, "Look at this," or takes a picture of someone looking really sad and gets some donations going. So I think a lot of them are just bracing. Honestly, they're just bracing for mass genocide. A lot of people will migrate to places where there's food and water and resource. And that's probably where you see a lot of migration issues, discussions start to pop up, immigration. And then they're going to wonder what happened. And then they're going to look back at videos like this where they just bombed a bunch of Iranians and forced them out their homeland, to wondering why millions of people didn't just stand still and starve to death and die so they can blame the local Iranian government. So now they're mad that they're spreading out to local areas that governments aren't as oppressed, and they're going to get burdened. The economy is going to crash, and they're just not going to care, as white Anglo-Saxons always never care, because they're starving out their own people here with homeless people and lacking healthcare, where they dump bodies off on the side of the road. They have this concept of just pure hatred and this idea that they're actually intelligent when they're not intelligent, because this idea of them being equal to these humans is something that passes over a lot of them, because as soon as they find anything to hate them with, their child marriages, their Sharia law, their understanding of how they conduct warfare, judiciary systems, they're going to immediately push the Republican button, which is we shouldn't help these people, should bomb them even harder. Because of that, it's going to become an issue of where how are they going to pull back a bunch of liberals they inspired to try and help people, to now to give this cognitive dissonance an actual answer other than these people don't live the way we do, therefore we should not bomb them. And that's something very difficult for a lot of Americans to go through in their brain and interpret, because as soon as they find a reason to hate someone or cancel someone or see someone as lesser, they will always take any opportunity they have to bomb them and kill them and destroy their lives and push them into extreme poverty. So a lot of these governments are just extreme hypocrites, extreme racists, and a lot of the Democrat Party and the left sock them just really virtue signal, because they do not have the power to stop them. But if they did, I promise you, if they truly believed in what they said, they would be doing everything they can to stop this from happening. But they're using it as a talking point. That's why this war just is mainly spoken about, because of the oil prices, the gas price, because that's more appealing to the human being in America than the concept of mass murder, than the concept of mass extermination based on a different culture or belief systems. They're gonna completely annihilate an entire civilization, say the man who said it was bad, but then they're going to ignore the part where they supported it every single step of the way to help validate canceling or destroying someone's life in order to enact your will of violence and death and destruction. They operate under the same understanding of reality.
For the sort of geopolitical relationships between them all and Iran and the United States going forward, could it, for example, could it propel states like Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords or not?
Well, I think, Piers, I've also spent the last 6 weeks traveling across the region. I was in Jerusalem. I then traveled to Saudi Arabia. I went to Qatar. I did an exclusive interview with the Qatari Prime Minister, who described the attacks from Iran as betrayal. Because don't forget, Qatar is one of the few countries on the planet that had good relations with Iran, that had an open dialogue with Iran, in many ways was acting as a mediator between the Americans and the Iranians. The Iranians were leaning on them to send messages to the US president at different points. So they felt a sense of betrayal. And we know that the Qatari Prime Minister has spoken to the Iranian Foreign Minister about those ongoing attacks. And if this ceasefire that is supposed to last 2 weeks collapses, what does that mean for these Gulf states? Because as you say, they've been priding themselves over the course of the last couple of decades of being some of the safest places on the planet, being a tax haven, for example, bringing in all sorts of entertainment and sport into the country, trying to give a different face and brand to the Middle East. And that, frankly, has been destroyed by this war. As you say, I mean, tourism is at an all-time low. Expats who live there are leaving. And I guess the leadership in the GCC are now thinking, okay, what do we actually have to protect ourselves? Because we had these American bases here, and actually that's done nothing to protect us. We thought the Americans would provide us with some kind of cover, and this war that we are not part of, didn't ask for, tried to deter the US president from entering, has actually turned into our war on our front doorstep, battering our economies as well. So I'm not sure, frankly, if Saudi Arabia will join the Abraham Accords. There is still a lot of ill feeling from Saudi Arabia towards Israel about the war in Gaza, for example. And so they still have that card on the table where they say, well, we wouldn't be normalizing any relations until there's a two-state solution. So I don't think, based on what's happening now, Saudi Arabia would suddenly, join forces and be part of the Abraham Accords. But certainly all of these Gulf states are going to have to think about how they defend themselves going forward. And that's why they've been talking to the Ukrainians, for example, because, it's not just interceptors that they need these drone interceptors, which the Ukrainians have been extraordinary at being able to create in their factories to take their war on with Russia.
It's fascinating. Let's just end by talking about Lebanon, because you're there in Beirut. I interviewed Danny Danon, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, the other day, and he posted something on his X account, kind of gloating, that he clarified to me in the interview that Israel is not bombing Lebanon. It is bombing very specifically Hezbollah, but a bit like the bombing campaign in Gaza, in the process of, in their eyes, going after Hamas, they also managed to kill an enormous number of civilians and cause enormous structural damage to vast swathes of Gaza, 70, 80% of it virtually razed to the ground. And we're seeing not quite the same scale in Lebanon, but you're seeing over 1 million people displaced. We're now seeing the death toll is over 2,000, 7,000 wounded. Many of these are civilians, women, children, and others. Like I say, it follows a familiar looking pattern to what happened in Gaza. What is your sense about what is happening there?
Again, it looks like people are aware of what's happening, but no one's really doing anything to stop it. There's not this huge protest in America or in the UK. It looks like a lot of them can't stop the war. Which, if you know anything about Darwin, it's really this: they're gonna do what they want because they can. I don't agree with this, by the way. This is my interpretation, for the record. I do not agree with any of these strongest will survive ideologues. But what they do is they have the most power in the room, similar to a man with a pistol and everyone with their bare hands. Sure, you can try and charge them, but now imagine as soon as that guy gets touched, 10 men enter with AR-15s. This is the equivalency of fighting against a first world nation. They are not poorly equipped. They're very well equipped. The problem is the propaganda in America cannot surpass what we need to stop this war. A lot of people, as soon as they want to go support, they have the argument and the discussion that the Hamas people are terrorists and they will kill you and rape you and pedophile your children, and no one can get past that because we have too much purity cleansing inside of the United States of America. We already have a bunch of people saying immigrants shouldn't be here just because they do crimes, and that came from even the Democrat Party. They don't want people in this country if they commit a crime, and now you expect them to defend a bunch of Muslims who are executing people, bombing Israeli territories, and then you're telling them that they're supposed to be merciful and stop this war because it's genocide to them. You've whitewashed the entire movement in America to be purely the most white liberal discussion you've ever seen. They don't care about Muslims that are terrorists. They don't care how they look. They care about the propaganda. The strongest will survive is also a reference to the wisest one who chooses their own kind. They are going to pick the ones that look like them, not a bunch of brown men with AK-47s who have a bunch of kafiyas that are completely different to their understandings because they know deep down that if they took any one of those protesters and had piercings or they were gay, those Hamas people would slaughter them for it. And they have enough evidence and information in order to know that's not a bigoted statement anymore. That's just the truth of the reality. So a lot of the times the left struggles so hard to get support because their purity cleansing just hates anyone who looks dirty or disgusting because your image now has to be the same as the Pope, which the Pope themselves were one of the targets of the left in discussing and how they don't want a theocracy or any of their Christian Catholics defending pedophiles or the idea of them ever siding with the pedophile. So again, you're dealing with the most hypocritical, most propagandized sector that wants to be anti-war in the United States of America, and they're not even united in their own country for their own workers' rights. They want to betray each other to get above each other in this hierarchy. When you understand what it takes to run a country, you're going to understand that someone wants to be on top always. When you're dealing with that with morality, the most morally up high has destroyed any intelligent person and has only picked the most shut-in people who have never done anything wrong in their life because they were able to keep themselves clean in order to keep themselves in that perspective. This is why the entire left collapses under this concept of being more pure than the next person. This is why when you try to go to Africa, you're dealing with people who can immediately bring up terrorism or immediately bring up women being raped or being the most dangerous places for women to tell you that Africa is not a great place and their ideology has failed. Then you're going to have to go back to America and tell them they deserve food and to survive when the most average American says, well, let's not help them and let them die since them dying is their own fault, not ours. So they don't want the moral judgment of execution or killing them. However, they'll wait until their houses are burned down to 8. It sounds like 70 to 80% by his statement. So they'll wait till about 80% of Gaza's gone to finally go, let's end the war. But before then, they were still funding the bills to give Israel their weapons. So when the time mattered most, because you would be able to see them as human beings, rather than seeing them as a Muslim, rather than seeing them as a terrorist, you already have the propaganda to help you pass at least a couple bills. So by the time you say Israel has the right to defend themselves, you've slaughtered 80% of their population, and you still don't have the support to stop the war or funding to even begin with. The problem with America is your purity cleansing has only disabled the left and limited the scope of which they can operate. Meanwhile, the Republicans are still standing by law and order and the due process that they have. The Republicans can build civilization even though they look like savage animals, because they at least follow the due process, they at least understand the basics of survival of the fittest, and they're able to utilize that in order to take power. The leftist sphere is just one big conglomerate corporatist ideology, followed by the most PR people ever you've seen to push the most customer service selling points, only to do nothing with it, follow through with none of their promises, and then sit back and tell you that they're sad about it. They don't care about people who are different than them. They completely have a divide within the black and brown communities because every time any of them try to talk to one another, they have to talk about their gang banging friend or their friend who was accused of terrorism or even rape or even pedophilia, but never got charged with it, but being accused as enough to execute them and persecute them endlessly. Meanwhile, they have their own accusations, allegations that they ignore completely for the white republic. They do not care other than their voter base. Their voter base is white liberal. The other voter base are people who gave up a long time ago because every time you vote, it's like getting nothing done. You see this now when they have the power to stop it, but they can't convince anyone on the Republican side because they don't have any alternatives or any solutions to any of the things that need to happen to end this war. They are only trying to scream out the talking points through virtue signaling rather than getting things done. This is why it's a big issue in America because every single protest you have about police killing a black man is going to end ultimately with some policy they're going to ignore, and then they're going to fund the police anyway. They're going to call police anyway to help themselves because they depend on them. Whereas others, like me, for example, I was denied 911 emergency services, and they said you're kind of always lie and you're kind of crazy or mentally ill just for calling because you made a report that they don't want to feel like they have to investigate because as soon as they take your name down or they hear how frantic you are, they get annoyed. You're dealing with the most uncivil American people that you'd ever seen in world history because they do not see even each other as a human other than something to exploit for them to get money out of or to push down in order to make themselves feel like they did the right thing. You will not save any lives with the Democrat Party. You have to find ways to actually get to the Republicans and speak to them because they can literally have a convicted rapist as president, and that's still not a good enough talking point to lose an election. He still won the election afterward. They don't have the same perspectives because the left is too busy purifying, and their purity testing only enables the ideology of electing incompetent people who still can't get anything done other than wearing a keffiyeh, while everyone ignores the fact that they still voted for a ton of the defense weapons and they pretended like they did not. Their concepts of justice are skewed, their perspectives are not valid or even should be entertained at all. It's a very naive ideology. They're mad when vacation spots are bombed. They're not mad when it's a regular dirty place they never went to. They're mad when someone they know is crying on TV because they're attractive or they look really sad in this one screenshot. So they suddenly follow the propaganda due to manipulation. They don't care that they're actually dying. They don't care until they see the rubble and everything leveled out to go, maybe we should do something, which is equivalent to American history when we learned not to enslave people by beating them to death and hanging them. And then eventually, after a couple hundred years, someone said something and wrote a book about it, and suddenly it changed. It's a propaganda game, and the propaganda game is lost by a bunch of incompetence, ignorance on the left, which of course the Republicans take advantage of because they can continue to win based on the basic Darwinistic principles. Let's just see what they got to say.
You know, Piers, the humanitarian crisis in this country is gut-wrenching. When you say over 1 million people displaced, many of them from southern Lebanon, tens of thousands of homes have been destroyed there. People who had nothing to do with Hezbollah didn't have military installations or facilities in their homes. Homes that have been there for decades, sometimes for 100 years, have been destroyed. I've spoken to people who had holiday homes in the south of the country that no longer stand, have been turned to rubble. And so people are moving.
I did not pre-watch this. Her saying holiday homes, I did not pre-watch this. But white people, right? White people. This is what I mean. White people do this. I did not pre-watch this. I promise you.
North, and here in Beirut, I mean, an extraordinary city, a beautiful city, civilians were shocked on Wednesday because they thought when they woke up that they were part of some kind of wider ceasefire deal. And Israel made it very clear, the IDF made it very clear that they were not part of that deal. And within the space of just minutes, 10 minutes, the IDF launched 100 strikes across this country, many of those strikes here in Beirut, not very far from where I'm currently standing. I interviewed a young girl, a 13-year-old girl, who was just mucking about on Snapchat to her friends, going for a walk with her dad, really quite close to where I'm here in central Beirut. And suddenly, you know, she saw buildings collapse around her. She was minutes away from being killed as far as her mum was concerned. We know, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry, that 99 women and 33 children were killed during that bombing campaign on Wednesday. It's now known as Black Wednesday in this country. They had a national day of mourning. So civilians here are reeling. They were shocked. They remain shocked that they're not part of any kind of ceasefire deal. And just minutes before I came on air, Hezbollah launched about 10 drones onto Israeli sites and to target the IDF. And so the war here continues, but this country continues also to be bruised, battered, and left devastated by the growing death toll, which is over 2,000 people killed now. And as you say, when we say over 1 million people displaced, you know, we throw these numbers around, but that is a hell of a lot of people, a fifth of this country now, frankly, homeless.
Yeah, I mean, the clip that you were talking about, this was this 13-year-old Naya Faki, I think her name is, who was filming a Snapchat video. Let's just take a quick look at that because it was riveting to watch.
Had you experienced anything like that before? I've, of course, experienced bombs, but I've never seen a building fall in front of me or trying to run away from one.
I mean,
again, I don't mean to devalue this person's experiences, but notice they picked a little girl that speaks English and not the like thousands, if not millions of people who see this all the time, but they speak like Farsi or some different language. You're starting to get my idea here? These people don't actually care about the people of Iran. They care about the ones they can colonize. They care about the ones that have been whitewashed or the ones that actually seem relatable to the people. They know what they're doing. A lot of these white people don't care about what's happening. They don't. It's a discussion, sure. But remember, this Piers Morgan show gets paid for this. Everyone here that you see is getting paid except me. Because a humane perspective is one where you have to judge their morality. And a lot of them don't want to risk the judgment of their own morality because they got it off being immoral. And the immoral standpoint they have is to always use people that are relatable rather than the truth and the story that actually hurts when you read it. So it's really just a humane principle, which I'll discuss later. Darwinistic principles, strongest will survive. Humane principles, the kindest will build civilization. Concepts like that. Those are the things that a lot of people need together, mixed in, because as soon as they mix it in together, you start to see really what it means to be a humane society that is strong enough to defend itself. A lot of this might, in my opinion, because they do not grow up in the societies of American ideology, you're gonna inspire a lot of people who are out there right now that no one can see. They're in like a desert. They're in like a place where they're bombing. And there's a man or a woman that's gonna inspire someone to do something really, really spiteful. You know what I mean? Very spiteful back to the American people, which is why a lot of these people in the back of their heads are Republicans are wondering if this will be the new Osama bin Laden or the new Saddam Hussein, or someone's going to be inspired that'll cause a huge war and they're going to have to fight for generations. I don't think this is going to end the way a lot of people want it to. Because the public doesn't care in America to stop this war, I promise you they're going to resort to Darwinism. Because if the humane principles don't apply, the most loving are creators of civilization, then you're in the Darwinistic environment, which is imperialism, which is an empire. Then the Darwinistic principles will tell you the only way to fight a Darwinist is to kill them. Because the strongest will survive. And that's territory. The peace talks did not go through either. That is something very, very unfortunate to know. Let's see what these people got to say.
it just says it all, really. You know, I think they can claim as much as they like that they're only targeting Hezbollah, but the video speaks for itself, and that's happening all over Lebanon. Yalda, I've got to leave it there, but that was a fascinating update on it all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, my panel's coming up in a few minutes, but joining me now is the renowned economist and global affairs expert, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Professor Sachs, welcome back to Uncensored.
Piers, great to be with you. Thank you.
Where are we with this war? What is going on? I mean, as I'm about to talk to you, Hillary Clinton has posted, Trump has become fully unhinged and we should talk about it. On MS Now this morning, she added, I read these posts like the majority of Americans, both shaking my head and really just feeling sick that we have a president who is such a disgrace. And this follows another barrage of slightly bonkers posts by Donald Trump, you know, pretending to be Jesus and attacking the Pope and so on and so on. Very familiar pattern to 6 weeks now, this kind of thing, attacking NATO, attacking all the European countries, attacking conservative podcasters, pretty well looking like he's on a rampage of, I guess, trying to find people to blame for what many people now think is turning into an enormous mess. What is your reading of it?
Well, it certainly is a disaster. It's a disaster of two people, Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. They are both mentally unstable as individuals, and they both lead ruthless governments. Both are waging war relentlessly, brutally. Donald Trump has said things in the last few days that of a shocking nature that no president in American history has ever come close to uttering. And he's now attacked Pope Leo and posted a picture of himself as Jesus Christ. In other words, The man is mentally, this is one of the few times I agree with Hillary Clinton, I guess. The man is mentally unstable. The war is a disaster. It is going to create a global crisis. It was a war, not even to say of choice, but of whim of Netanyahu and Trump. Two people got us into this. It's a measure of how completely deinstitutionalized the United States government is, that this is basically a war chosen by one person with a sycophantic Secretary of Defense, all the rest of his tiny inside team going along, but knowing that this is tragic and farcical is the word that one of the insiders used, and no role whatsoever of Congress, no evidence of even a minimal interagency consultations other than to hear the objections of the intelligence agencies and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So we're in the hands of absolute craziness.
What is fascinating, actually, as we're talking, he's now deleted, very unusually, the post of him as Jesus Christ, this image which he posted earlier. He very rarely deletes anything. What is interesting to me is I urged him to delete the post in which he was raging about ending civilization, which would have involved killing all 90 million Iranians. And I also didn't like his, and I urged him to delete the Easter Sunday message in which he was talking in the most foul-mouthed way about it all and saying praise be to Allah. None of this is helping anything from what I can look at.
I'll be honest, Donald Trump is the equivalency of like a Reddit atheist right now. Like he just doesn't believe in God at all, which isn't bad. But he doesn't insinuate he believes in science either through his naivety of political science. So it's kind of it's kind of like the issue isn't really about the disrespect, but the follow-up is just really bad chess when it comes to international politics. Because there are still a lot of Christians who believe in magic God, and there's a lot of people in the Muslim faith that still believe in Jesus as magic God too. So disrespecting a lot of simple people because they're scared of like the simpleton. Plus, it's a land of liberty, right? You're free to practice your magic god. You can build your own cult and say like we're in this cult together, and then essentially split out the donations when you're scamming people. It's legal in America. You just file it and you have a cult. Taking advantage of simple people is legal. It's freedom of speech. You have no obligation to uphold it. It's like a policy for some social media places, but not all of them. You technically have so many rights as a private business owner as well, which is where his entitlement comes from. The associated identity of being a political scientist, that is a religious scientist, should tell you that even though you don't believe in your Jesus or your God, you're supposed to be still playing the simpleton, right? If someone's in Islam and they look at Islam as like a religious science, you still can't go out and disrespect Muhammad or Aisha or talk about Jesus in a bad way because someone will threaten to kill you, sure, but someone will follow through with it, sure, but you caused a ecosystem which is of peace and you never agitated it, and you're going around and you're planning stuff and you're growing things and you're doing your own thing. And this is a metaphor of what he did. He essentially threw a giant rock at a bunch of beehives and a bunch of hornets nest, and then suddenly he's like, why is this happening to me? Everyone hates me. And it's an ideology of just not having proper science. You can have a great garden. You can have great, in your perspective, an interpretation of reality. However, the other person's interpretation is not obligated to conform to yours, which is why the beehive or the hornet's nest or the honey that tastes so sweet can still sting and make your heart bleed. So a lot of these people feel entitled, very entitled, like you have to understand my point, which is kind of what they're supposed to do for the beehives and the wasps, because the wasp will essentially sting you and they might not exactly be a great time to deal with. So in political science, he's causing so many enemies and destroying so many of his camps that are loyal to him that he's essentially destroying himself, and he's going on what looks like a mad king's rage as he just starts slamming and destroying anyone who is disloyal to him, because he's surrounded himself, like he stated, sycophants, which are yes men for anyone who doesn't know. And those yes men will continuously, perpetually support him without ever once questioning his authority. which is why it's a big issue because a lot of these people who submit to his authority are only doing so because they believe it's like a reward system, which that reward system doesn't look so great when you're now getting extra attacks from these bees and these wasps, and now the rattlesnakes are out, and now the local jaguar is finding out and is trying to bite your neck. It's just pointless. It's unnecessary burden. It's like Rome overexpanding. It's like Germany during Nazi Germany overexpanding and then getting warred from the north and then the west and then the south, and then they're pretty much just completely destroyed. They are overexpanding not only in political science through discussion and tribe, but they are overexpanding physically with not only the Latin American operation they're trying to push, but also the Middle Eastern one they're trying to push. Which NATO does not support the Middle East, but Latin America I'm terrified about because that's a lot of places neoliberals go. That's a lot of places where they conspire Russia and China going to help people. And so they have a lot more excuse and leeway to go push that and actually kill tons of people with support if they need be by dividing the land up and tossing it away. So they're gonna try and reenact another manifest destiny everywhere they go, especially if you're dealing with people who don't respect religion and they pretend to just to get the Catholic and Christian vote, which is the majority of what Americans' religious beliefs are. They're gonna be seen as fakes or frauds and they're gonna be dethroned, sure, but as long as it's only one guy, which is Trump, they can use that as him as a fall guy and then follow up with a new Republican who's gonna be extra religious or extra Christian or extra Catholic, which they're starting to gauge the waters for the presidency if you pay attention to what they're doing. He's saying things that upset certain crowds. They're seeing which crowds they have to be loyal to, which they probably already knew, but they're double checking to see if they can actually get away with this hardcore loyalism of someone who chooses a pure Darwinistic peace through strength ideology, which is trying to reenact a lot of the white supremacist old notions within this country where a lot of people can't fight against the white supremacy, mainly because of the purity testing of the left. And the purity testing of the left makes it so pure that you're just white. They want to whitewash you on the left. And if you don't get whitewashed on the left, they're going to throw you to the Republicans to be eaten up like a bunch of wild dogs eating a rabbit. So the issue is that there's no party for the people of color in America, which would actually stop a lot of this, since they have what I would call the slave's perspective, or the person who's been whipped and constantly has to be treated like complete garbage. Because here in America, the segregated societies are our Palestine. The societies here of where everyone's getting pushed to homelessness and starvation is our aid trucks getting blocked by Israel. Because here in America, we have our own problems, but no one wants to discuss that because it's not a relatable trend. And that relatable trend is still right now, as this moment, defending people who have child marriage, people who rape, people who kill other people through terrorism, and you still see more support for them than any single Latino getting accused by ICE, any single black person being shot dead by police, because they're tired of the trend constantly going in front of white people or the white liberals, which get bored eventually. And eventually you're just in a position where they're just accusing you of defending terrorists just like Palestine. And since you cannot fix the problems here in America, what makes you think you can fix an entire Middle Eastern issue when you can't even solve the issues here in America about the impoverished people, which are the majority black and brown? And when you go to the Middle Eastern country, there's a bunch of white Israelis fighting against a bunch of black and brown Middle Easterners, and then you're somehow thinking you're going to solve the problem when they still have 1960s racism, which the Republican Party themselves are fighting for to reenact here in an apartheid American state, which none of you are doing anything to fight against because you capitulate and you hide yourselves amongst a party of which sells a fake idea of virtue signaling, which they don't even adhere to themselves, as they have an elected official in the Democrat Party who was a part of the Jim Crow era, and then several Clintons who not only cheated, but were associated with child pornography or child pedophilia. In what way are you actually purity testing when your entire party is just full of it? Nancy Pelosi does fraud. AOC's high on ketamine. She voted president in a vote of kill all the genocidal Palestinians. Yes or no? She said, I don't know. What is this purity testing you have? And then you put up on a TV everything the Republicans want to say about the Democrat Party, saying they're dirty and disgusting by getting you to dethrone your own people. Meanwhile, they have several people on their party accused and have allegations, and nothing is wrong is happening to any of them. You have an elected rapist. Please tell me how the Republicans are gonna lose to this Democrat Party, who can't even get past the very notion of having segregated societies because their very own voters are terrified of the hood. They're terrified of a person who doesn't speak their language like the Latino, because they think the Latinos are the invaders species, which is now a new term for just another Palestinian in their line. How are you going to defend the people here in America if you can't even defend your own country's ideology against the people? I'm very curious to see how this is going to play out in the long term because it's going to play out like we've always seen, which is why black and brown people don't really vote. Is that voting for a Democrat is the same as getting your vote and lighting it on fire? Because at least if you choose the Republican Party, they get some sort of fake sense of notion of caring, and then you can might maybe be able to fake a tokenism so you can get into their heads and give them some sort of sympathy so you can change the course of history. But other than that, you have nothing to depend on the Democrat Party about. You have nothing to depend on SOCDEMs about. And it's one of the biggest issues we have right now in a party that none of these people can get past the cultural argument because all of them still want white liberalism.
Yeah, usually we have a political issue. Israel and the United States together have created a disaster in the Middle East. Israel has created a genocide. Israel and the United States together have created this war of whim in Iran that has killed thousands, but has already begun to devastate the entire world. But we also have clearly a clinical condition. We have an individual mental incapacity. The psychiatrists and psychologists that look at this call it the dark triad, meaning that the man is narcissistic, Machiavellian, in other words, completely untrustworthy in every way, and psychopathic, meaning that killing other people does not have any concern for either of these people. So these are both dark triad personalities. Many people are saying, Piers, that Trump is also showing symptoms of frontotemporal dementia as well. In other words, that this personality's always been there, but the loss of impulse control has taken over.
This is a ridiculous. I don't like Trump. I don't support Trump. But calling him a dementia riddled when you know the course of the US imperialism over 40 years is just the same exact thing, like a line graph going up to just death and destruction always, is ridiculous to assume this is just a Trump issue. It is such a distraction. It is such a distraction they're using to try and call everyone disabled because they did it to Joe Biden. They don't know actual long term politics, and it shows because this guy's clearly someone of money or some sort because he doesn't clearly have enough time to realize this is just the same indoctrination.
Perhaps because of dementia added to this. We have a very serious issue. There's never been a president in this incapacity. It's very dangerous.
They've literally always had this in the United States of America in every capacity. They have the genocidal morons that play it off. They might be a little bit more publicly correct, or they might be a little bit more cordial and nice and put together, but it's the same mentality. He took the mask off, really. He showed you what white imperialism looks like, and it gave a lot of uncomfortable feelings to white people who are used to saying the N-word, but without saying it, they just treat you like the N-word. That's essentially the party of the United States of America. They might not say it, but they'll make sure you're on EBT, welfare, Section 8, and put you at the lowest levels of society, and then tell you good riddance. You should be grateful. And then they take that mentality, apply it to another country, that's called aid. They give aid to a bunch of third world people, and then they say you should be grateful. We could have abandoned you. And that's the same policy. And then the killing is the brutality of the police applied to the Middle East, which is now being bombed by our taxes, and we just say, please stop. How does that solve anything? How do you not see that this is the same system they use here in America that they used to enslave people across the ocean and utilize the same systemic oppression as well as the hegemonic control in order to establish complete dominance over your day-to-day life? How can you not see that this is the same exact administration that has never once faltered since the beginning and its founding? This is clearly just white imperialism. And nobody cares because this is a white man's opinion, right? They had to get rid of the brown ones. The brown ones got a little too angry. The brown ones kept saying you guys were terrorists without breaking it down to a science, I guess. Because every time they break it down to science, you interrupt them. Ah, here they go again. Ah, they're complaining again. Because it's always a bias of hating the people of color without trying to say it. And your biggest political strength as a white man is to just never say you hate them so much because they're different. You got to get a whitewash one. You got to get one really white on the inside. So when they speak, you just hear another talking point you heard from another white man that has accreditation or some sort of riches beyond his belief so that his words suddenly mean more respect to you. the civil rights movement is fucking dead in America. I promise you, any leader in there is just barely surviving, clinging on through like just threads, trying to just swing to safety, and everyone else is just making monkey jokes the whole time because he said swing and has something to grab onto. Meanwhile, the guy almost fell to his fucking death. The United States of America is filled with the most self-centered white men, and then this is the best defense we got. It's like, oh no, the oil and the dude might have dementia. Yeah, you said that about Biden. You said that about the other guy. You still voted for him. You voted for the left, who is a Jim Crow guy. You voted for the right, which is a modern Jim Crow guy. And then you told Obama to go fuck himself. What the fuck? And I'm pretty sure Obama's just sitting there quiet. He doesn't want to get in on this. This is just white people shit like a motherfucker. I excuse my language. I'm sorry, but they just make me lose my mind. They have a guy mocking Jesus Christ in charge, and he's a convicted rapist. I'm supposed to sit here like this is a normal administration, but the guy previously barely got his words out. Everyone just called him Dementia Joe, Jim Crow Joe. The guy before him was just the same guy now as Trump, and then the guy before him was like everyone's favorite, and then he's just like careful because he technically would have bombed the shit out of the Middle East too if he had to. Black, white, 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 right? Before the black guy, white, 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 the scale of damage, right? It didn't go like this at any point. It went up, 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 up. 40 years of just straight Israel and America allegiances going straight to this point of where they're going to bomb the hell out of Iran. And they're terrified of them having nukes because they just spent the last 40 years killing the shit out their family members and proxy states. If you study the actual long-term political science of this and you're not just hobbying because you're a millionaire who's bored and people respect you just because you're rich, then you would understand that this is just a continuation of the genocide and imperial conquest of a complete extermination blueprint that they can enact in any single country. In the United States of America right here, you are getting murdered by this same program. And nobody speaks out for you because what if I do, everyone is just going to ignore my voice just like they ignored yours. Because what's this brown man? No, I got comments saying, well, you're just yapping. You don't know what you're talking about. I reference articles from references they will never Google or look up for themselves because they don't want to educate themselves. And this is the general public of the United States of America. The majority of them just don't want to educate themselves. They're extremely simple people.
But I just want to emphasize, on top of this is a collapse of our governmental processes. There are no consultations with Congress. Congress, for all intents and purposes, doesn't exist. The National Security Council, for all intents and purposes, does not exist. The intelligence agencies, for all intents and purposes, do not exist. They advised against this. So we have a one-man rule, and the one man happens to be crazy.
I mean, there will be some who listen to you, Professor Sachs, and that you listen to your damning critique of Trump and Netanyahu, calling them psychopathic and delusional, as you did in an interview at the weekend. But then you went on to say that only Vladimir Putin, Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping can stop Trump and Israel with their policies at the moment. And they'll say, well, hang on. You talk about delusional, psychopathic and wanting to kill everyone. What about Vladimir Putin? Isn't that exactly the way that he's portrayed himself in recent years?
No, I think the situation is completely different. I'm talking of a psychological assessment of Trump. One can discuss, as we have done at length, and I'm delighted that we've done so, how we got into this open conflict with Russia after all of the possibilities of peace. That is a historical process that lasted more than 30 years, starting with the U.S. cheating on the clearest possible commitment that it made about not expanding the U.S. military, much less to Russia's border. But that's a historical and political issue, and it's a major political issue. Here, I'm talking about a psychological issue. We have not seen any of those three leaders post themselves as Jesus Christ, take on the Pope, say that they're going to destroy a civilization by evening, or use the language that we can't even use, Piers, or maybe we can use. I don't know if we're allowed to say, close the fucking straight, you crazy bastards, which the President of the United States the President of the United States wrote on Easter morning. This is something we should understand as being different. This is something absolutely distressing, because when we also understand the account of how these decisions have been made, they have been made by one person.
Is it not true that on that point,
yes.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of debate, obviously, after what Hillary Clinton has said, and others, there's going to be a lot of debate about whether Trump is suffering some kind of cognitive issues, and that will be what it is. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah.
But is there, when you look at what Trump has done with Iran, I mean, I think I'm right in saying, I'm sure you'll know the answer to this, but since World War II, I don't think any American president has sought congressional approval for any military action, because they've never couched it as war. They've always couched it as a military action or whatever, which means they don't need to actually get pre-congressional approval. Is that the case?
Well, just to say, we've had a huge deterioration of our democracy since 1947, when the CIA was established under the National Security Act. So I won't argue with you there. There have been many attempts to go to Congress and to go to the United Nations for approval, sometimes disregarded in the end. Sometimes Congress has voted approval, like the infamous Gulf of Tonkin resolution, in which Congress authorized the use of force in Vietnam on false pretenses. And similarly, after 9/11, there was a congressional authorization of the use of force. But we've never had a process as deinstitutionalized as the one we have right now, where we basically, even the deep state, let's put it that way, the CIA, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Armed Services Committees of Congress, they're not part of this decision making. We know actually the kind of tick-tock that of how this war took place because of an unusually clear and explicit inside account that the New York Times reported a few days ago. This was basically Netanyahu spinning a crazy story to Trump, and Trump buying it while the rest of the room was saying, "Are you kidding? This is farcical." But this man, I'm sorry, I don't know how well you know him or not, and I apologize, but I observe him. I don't know him, but he's not very smart. This man is not knowledgeable.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I've known Trump 20 years. I would say he has actually pretty good gut instinct normally, which is not necessarily the normal political smarts or huge intellect, whatever those things, but that his gut instincts have actually often been quite good. What was striking about the New York Times piece was that everybody else's gut instinct was that the sequence of events that Netanyahu and the head of Mossad were laying out as what would happen if the Americans came in with the Israelis to attack Iran was the Ayatollah would go, the IRGC would start to collapse, the people would rise up, and they'd all be so distracted that no one would pay any attention to the Strait of Hormuz. And only the top bit of that happened. So, yes, they took out the supreme leader, but the rest of this did not happen. The IRGC remains firmly in charge. The people have not risen up, and the Strait of Hormuz has become an enormous economic.
Thinking people will rise up against the IRGC is so dumb, because in the United States of America, we say our leader's deranged and not worth following, yet we still follow because we don't want to die in a shootout, and we can't inspire the next person to fight because they're obese and overdosing on chicken nuggets. The average American will not shoot to kill to take over this country because you don't even have money to get that funded war. And then on top of that, you need like really cool speakers, right? They're like, let's go to war. They're like let's get it, let's kill this guy. And you gotta assume that guy who says, let's kill this guy, doesn't just die that week and doesn't just get assassinated by the IRGC or here in America by the police or ICE agents. So how do you expect in their country that you're just suddenly gonna get these like multi-billion-dollar funded terrorist squads just bombing the IRGC for you? We won't even betray the president, and that guy's a convicted rapist who wants to kill us with ICE agents illegally. He betrayed the religion of Jesus Christ, which is our biggest religion. Still nothing. Imagine if the Ayatollah or the supreme leader just suddenly said, fuck Muhammad. And then everyone's just like still loyal. That's where we're at. Because we have white ISIS here. We have like Christian ISIS. And still no one's going to rise up against him for disrespecting Jesus Christ. No one's going to fight against him for starving out thousands of Americans. No one's going to stand up against him for deporting a bunch of Latinos because they managed to get a bunch of black people to shit talk the Latinos and a bunch of Latinos to shit talk the black people and a bunch of white people to go, you know what, we're better than them. And then we haven't established just like a pivot off where we're just attacking each other and no one can get anything done. How do you expect us to rebel in America if they won't even rebel in the IRGC, which is the same exact concept, but better, if not worse conditions? Better in the sense of the leader might, in our eyes, look bigoted, but if you understand our perspective in America, it's the same one they have, which they grew up under Islam, they grew up under that ideology. You still need decades of actual, like, ideological aligned people to start that revolution. And it's hard to start a revolution when the majority of people are just going to conform to the normal ways, because as soon as you turn to Western imperialism, you see Gaza getting bombed. You see any Middle Eastern country that sided with them before turn to complete poverty. And anyone who tries to side with them doesn't get paid out or even get rich. They get fucked over. In what way do they owe you any loyalty to your culture of Western imperialism when it's an exploitative culture that is just going to destroy their home values, destroy their religious values, and destroy their concept of an economy? Because the economy is just going to go back to America and they're going to stay even poorer than they were before. Why would they rebel? Here in America, we have poor people. It's the richest country in the world. They rob people of opportunity here. They oppress people here. There's homeless people here. No one cares. No one's out there trying to give people jobs. No one's out here trying to help people. What country do they have to fight for? The United States of America has a crisis between the homeless, the healthcare, the housing, the people that even want to make love with women are having like grindset mindset, manosphere, misogyny's at an all-time high. I just saw a poll that said religion's being accepted again in America. So a lot of people say religion's important. It's like a therapy to them. To what reason would we ever understand a culture that lives in a, you would argue, a better state than us, because at least they have the religion as a backbone, and here we have nothing but a backbone but a stack of cash and gold? What do we owe this Western imperialist society that robs the everyday worker of their wages, robs the men of their self-respect and dignity, calling them all incel or losers for being poor, and then their only speaker of respecting women is probably some misogynist tool that doesn't want to do anything but objectify them at the same time saying they care about women's rights? What do we have here in America that looks so enticing to people other than a bunch of tokenized rich women, tokenized rich people of color who exploit each other and screw each other over? And at the end of the day, when you ask their opinion, they say the most white liberal stuff you've ever heard, which is just, I don't know, I just don't want death to happen. I don't know, someone will figure it out. Who? What do you think they're gonna do in Iran? You think they're gonna suddenly just summon 100 Osama bin Ladens? 100 Ali Khamenei's? He's dead. What reason do they have to fight for if not just to fight continuously against the people who victimize them? What do you think's happening in America with the revolution? They want to fight against the oppressor. They don't want to join some external government that'll overthrow it.
Economic battering ram where Iran's found out it can hold the world to ransom. And
Precisely.
we're now in the kind of utterly perverse place where, having said that he would, blow up the whole of civilization in Iran, so 90 million people, if they didn't open the Strait of Hormuz, he is the one now launching a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
A blockade of a blockade.
Right. So you literally,
Yes.
I mean, I just scratched my head. Just finally, Jeffrey, before we let you go, the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has just seen his 16-year rule ended. Peter Magyar, once a staunch loyalist of his Tisza party, won Sunday's parliamentary election by a landslide. People are seeing it as a significant bellwether for MAGA because Orban's concept of illiberal democracy and his focus on Christian liberty and anti-immigration policies made him a hero to MAGA activists. And of course, one of the reasons Donald Trump sent J.D. Vance to try and save him at the ballot box, which was unsuccessful. I know you've praised the Hungarian government's stance on the war in Ukraine, specifically its push for peace negotiations and opposition to escalating the conflict. But is there a bigger sort of signal being sent here by what the Hungarian electorate has done. You know, we've seen a rise of authoritarian leaders around the world since Trump won the election in 2016. Is this the beginning of the reversal of that, do you think?
I don't think so. I think what we have is people everywhere in Europe and in the United States are very unhappy. So approval ratings of our politicians are absolutely at the bottom. This is true in the UK. It's true across Europe. In just about every country, it's true for Trump. These politicians will lose at each election. This is what's going to happen right now. None of them is listening to the common sense of the public. Stay out of the damn wars. Attend to our problems, which are very real. Stop this escalation towards World War III. And Macron, Merz, Trump, Starmer, none of them is going to face an electorate successfully because they're all unpopular. And in the case of Hungary, it's quite clear. Orban was in a very long time. People are unhappy with their economic circumstances. They voted him out. So at least this is what democracy does. It gives you that moment. It doesn't give you much say in between, but it gives you that moment to vote people out. And Trump is going to face this in November. He knows it. It's the end of the Republican control of Congress. And the last 2 years of the Trump administration are going to tie this man up in knots because he's going to be impeached almost immediately, I would presume, by a Democratic majority in Congress, and because he has abused the political system and wrecked living standards in the United States. So this is going to come up for a lot of politicians. I don't think it proves anything about clarity of any trends. There is no clarity in our part of the world, as you know. Everything is confused right now.
I am certainly confused, but as always, you bring a bit of clarity to a confused world. Professor Jeffrey Sachs, thank you very much.
Great to be with you. Thanks a lot.
I'm joined now by my panel, Vincent Ashana, PBD podcast Angry Patriot, host of the Dan Abrams Show on SiriusXM and YouTube, Dan Abrams, Fred Fleitz, the Vice Chairman of the America First Policy Institute, and John Fugelsang, author of the book Separation of Church and Hate. Well, welcome to all of you, all with slightly different perspectives, I think, on this. Let me start with you, Dan Abrams, if I can. I mean, there's so much going on, almost 98% of it driven by what comes out of Donald Trump's mouth or his social media posts in the last 6 weeks. I can't get my head round any consistent strategy or logic to pretty much any of this. And I've really reached the conclusion that he got into something almost certainly at the enthusiastic behest of Israel. He's got into something that he now wishes he could get out of, but he's no idea how to get out of it. Am I wrong?
No, I think that's probably right. But I think that we need to separate out. You mentioned sort of getting caught up in the social media side of it, right? What he says, and we all respond and we react. And you're right. We do, right? That's typically what generates the news cycle. This is different. This is actual action. This is lives lost. This is $1 billion a day. This is a now situation where the exit doesn't seem clear. And, you know, look, you can argue that militarily this has been a success, right? And that's what the administration would say. The follow-up question to that is, okay, that's true. It has. But then what? What have we achieved? What were the goals that we were seeking here? And now Iran is standing up to the United States. I mean, think about that. The United States and Iran held sort of face-to-face meetings, equals. And Iran stood up to the United States and said, no, we're not doing it. And so the response is, all right, well, we may bomb them again. Okay. Now, look, the blockade actually kind of makes sense in terms of trying to put pressure on them, but there's nothing that indicates it's going to work. And that's the question that we have to focus on. What is the goal here? What is the end? What are we trying to achieve?
Yeah, and I don't think we know. And I'm not sure President Trump knows. Vinny, welcome back to Uncensored. Great to have you back. Look, from where I'm looking, everything Dan said is correct. You know, we were told, the New York Times did a big deep dive into this, that revealed how Benjamin Netanyahu painted a picture of a sequence of events that would happen if the Americans joined Israel on this mission, and if they took out the Ayatollah, then the IRGC would be irrevocably damaged, then the people would rise up, and they'd all be so distracted that no one would notice the Straits of Hormuz and it would be irrelevant. None of that, apart from the first bit, has happened. The regime is clearly still firmly in place, albeit it's lost a few people, but they've been replaced by like-minded people. You've got the supreme leader being replaced by his son, for example, argument's sake, apparently wounded, but is alive and will be the new supreme leader. You have the people not uprising at all, not even rising up in the way they did in January when they were protesting. And the Strait of Hormuz has become this extraordinary economic battering ram being used by Iran to effectively hold the United States to ransom over literally a barrel or a few million barrels. Where's the win here, Vinny?
Well, thank you for having me back on, Piers. I'm happy to see that you're doing a little bit better and you're a little bit more mobile.
Thank you.
Piers, I'm not gonna lie to you. The article you're talking about, the New York Times. I've read it multiple times. I've spoken about it, and you nailed it, Piers. The first two were decapitating the Ayatollah, crippling the Iran's capacity. But then the two main ones, the regime change and the uprising from the people. And one of the best quotes in that meeting, John Ratcliffe said it was farcical. Marco Rubio said, in other words, sir, it's BS. I'm not going to say the word. And then the most important one by the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Raisin Kane, he said, sir, this is, in my experience, standard operating procedure for the Israelis. They oversell, and their plans are not always well developed. They know they need us, and that's why they're hard selling. So, Piers, in that meeting, apparently, it was Bibi Netanyahu with Mossad on on a Zoom call behind, and they pitched. Nobody was on board once Bibi left, but for some reason, the president went through with it. And having, my family's from Iran, Piers, as you know, we're Assyrian. And the people, we forgot about the people. What about the people? Now it's all about the oil. Now it's all about the Hormuz. And I just think Israel just, this is what Israel does. And at the same time, Piers, when we're basically, our troops, this all started, let's not forget, Marco Rubio on camera said, all right, he said, well, we didn't want to strike first, but since Israel was going to go and our assets, our soldiers, 13 of them, God rest their souls dead, they're going to be put in harm's way, so we got to go first, Piers. That really, really bothers me that he has that much control that since they're going to go, we got to go. And for a nation, Piers, which bothers me, you mentioned this, I believe, last week, a nation that we all know has nuclear weapons, but we all have to play this game like we don't know that they have nukes. Do you know how dangerous that is? The Non-Proliferation Treaty, they're not in it, Piers. If, God forbid, they use a nuke, we can't even point and say, hey, it was Israel, because technically they don't have it, Piers. I think the people in the president's ear, they're not giving him good information. They're kind of swaying him that they want to. And Jared Kushner is over there with Steve Witkoff. Jared Kushner, does he even have security clearance, Piers? He's married to Trump's daughter, and he's known Bibi Netanyahu, Jared Kushner's family. Charles Kushner has known him since he was a child. So that's a little conflict of interest for me, Piers. And again, when there's American soldiers and our troops are at risk, I'm not a fan of it at all, Piers.
It gets very real very, very quickly. Fred Fleitz, welcome to Uncensored. You're vice chairman of an institute called the America First Policy. I'm really struggling to understand how any of this puts America first. Trump was elected on various big picture promises to the American people. One was he was not going to drag America into pointless, expensive Middle Eastern wars. He's now dragged them into the biggest and most expensive one he could have done, and from where I sit, at the moment, the most pointless. Secondly, he was going to take care of cost of living. He was going to bring down inflation. And all that. Well, the complete opposite is happening. The prices at the pump are raging. Food prices will be next because fertilizer's been held up, as well as oil and gas in the Strait of Hormuz. All of this goes, to me, completely contrary to the concept of America First that Trump was selling the American electorate. What do you feel?
Well, it's great to be here. President Trump answered this last June after the 12-day war when some of his a small number of MAGA critics raised some of these points, and he said, look, I came up with the America First approach to U.S. national security, and I decide what's in it, and stopping Iran from getting a nuclear bomb is part of my approach. And most of his followers agreed. I mean, some of them may not agree exactly with this, but they trusted him. I mean, I just take a different approach here. I think we are seeing the collapse of another false anti-Trump narrative. You may remember a week ago, we heard that Iran is winning and Iran has the upper hand, that the Iranians will refuse to attend talks with the United States unless they got sanctions relief, unless there was a full and complete ceasefire, unless Israel stopped attacking Lebanon. They didn't get any of those conditions. Instead, they sent a large delegation to Pakistan. They were the ones who were begging for a ceasefire. They were the ones who wanted a negotiated settlement. We had 3 rounds of talks with them, which I think is very promising. I think the door to a diplomatic solution is still open. And I think Trump has achieved his objectives. Iran will not get a nuclear weapon now. The capability of making nuclear weapons, all the facilities have been destroyed. Iran's so-called missile shield, which Secretary Rubio talked about, is going to be ended. They still have a missile arsenal.
Where's the enriched uranium?
You know what? I have a big difference on that. I've studied this very closely. There may be 9 to 11 weapons worth of uranium hexafluoride that, if further processed, could fuel nuclear weapons. I'm happy to leave that stuff in the ground. Trump has said he's bombed the heck out of it. It's being watched by satellites. I know there's people going on Fox News and saying we have to dig that stuff up and get it out. That's absolutely wrong. We really don't need to do that. We can leave it there. I don't think the Iranians could process it, even if they could dig it out.
Well, that's a massive leap of faith, isn't it? Given that they've indicated the complete opposite. But also, this, in last summer, the 12-day war, when it ended, we were told that's it. They have no way now of developing nuclear weapons. We've ended that threat. Then 8 months later, the United States is launching a full-on war with Iran, precisely to do what they said had been neutralized 8 months earlier. And now you're proposing that the way this ends is the Iranians keep all their enriched uranium, which is 60% enriched and well on the way to becoming maybe 10, 11 nuclear weapons. None of this makes sense to me. I don't think I'm a particularly stupid individual.
After the 12-day war, we were hoping with this ceasefire, Iran would stop its pursuit of nuclear weapons and stop building its missile program. There was a massive increase of its missile program, which the president decided to deal with in January. We started negotiations. The Iranians didn't want to deal. Then the attacks began on February 28th. And according to Rubio, if we let them continue this missile program, by the end of the year, there'd be nothing we could do to stop their pursuit of nuclear weapons. They were rebuilding the nuclear weapons program, too. Frankly, this all makes sense if you look at what Iran did between June of last year and January of this year.
And your solution is you leave them with all their enriched uranium so they could just do it all over again?
I don't think people understand what this enriched uranium is. It's in the form of uranium hexafluoride. It has to be further processed in uranium metal. Then it has to be put into unfinished and unfueled nuclear devices that probably have been destroyed also. This enriched uranium is poisonous. If you go near it, you need hazmat suits.
Fred, all due respect,
what's that?
A lot of use of the word probably there.
I just think the idea of sending in American troops to dig this stuff out, when I think it's probably unusable or difficult for the Iranians to get. Trump has bombed the heck out of it. He said we're going to watch it with satellites. I think that's the right approach.
Okay. John Filgenstein, welcome back to Uncensored. Great to see you.
Lovely to see you all.
First of all, just your reaction to what you just heard from Fred Fleitz, then we'll get into the Pope and Jesus Christ.
Yeah, the world had a working, functioning deal to keep Iran from getting nukes, and the U.S. military declared for years that Iran was complying with the terms of the deal. It wasn't just Barack Obama, it was multiple nations that put this deal together. Now, I don't trust anything Trump says, I trust nothing Netanyahu says, and I don't trust the Ayatollahs too much either. But I don't think the generals of the U.S. military were lying to us all those years that the deal was working, and they tore it up, and now they're trying to take credit for solving a problem that they created. This movement has despised the U.S. Constitution as much as they despise the New Testament, and right now we're witnessing many Trump supporters begin to realize that for a decade of their lives, they've been enrolled in Trump University. They have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, and led astray for 10 years. Vladimir Putin is helping the Iranians attack U.S. bases, and Trump is lifting sanctions on the Russians. We're burning through $1 billion a day on this after years of promising this wouldn't happen. The Strait of Hormuz is now a toll road. Putin's getting rich every day off of this. And we have a president who's threatening mass death on Easter Sunday. Piers, I always thought the point of Easter was people coming back from the dead, not threatening to send more people there. And as far as J.D. Vance, I'm shocked that a smug, abrasive, condescending guy like him failed at diplomacy. But let's be honest, they didn't want a deal because Netanyahu doesn't want this to stop yet.
Well, let's talk specifically then about the two extraordinary religious interventions that Trump has made. I mean, there's actually three, because the Easter Sunday post he made I thought was just appalling. I told him to delete it, and everyone was gleefully telling me, oh, it's on the right. They were saying, Piers, you don't understand. I thought you knew Trump. You know, he'll never delete it. The outrage is baked in. And then, of course, today, when he posted a picture of himself as Jesus Christ, a lot of the very same people were saying, this is outrageous, you should delete it, which he now has. I mean, Ari Fleischer, one of Trump's biggest, most slavish supporters, who will literally defend the indefensible, says President Trump's team should never have posted this image. It's inappropriate and embarrassing. It's offensive. What made me chuckle is it wasn't President Trump's team, it's him. You know, he does this stuff. He posts it. I mean, he may not physically press the button, but he's the one compiling it and telling people to post it. Riley Gaines, another big Trump supporter. I can't understand why he'd post this. Is he looking for a response? Either way, two things are true. A little humility would serve him well. God shall not be mocked. And Marjorie Taylor Greene accused him of blasphemy. In fact, she said it's more than blasphemy. It's an antichrist spirit. Then we have the attack on all the podcasters separate to this. From Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, Alex Jones, and others. To which Alex Jones responded, "How do we 25th Amendment his ass?" And I actually had the very uncomfortable thing of Alex Jones agreeing with something I posted about Trump today, which made me question my own judgment.
Thoughts and prayers, Piers. Thoughts and prayers.
But let's come to the attack also in the context of it on the Pope, because Trump on Air Force One, as you're about to board it, said this:
"We don't like a Pope that's going to say that it's okay to have a nuclear weapon. We don't want a Pope that says crime is okay in our cities. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. He's a very liberal person, and he's a man that doesn't believe in stopping crime. He's a man that doesn't think that we should be toying with a country that wants a nuclear weapon."
I mean, he added a few other things. He said, I don't want a Pope who criticises the President of the United States because I'm doing exactly what I was elected. I mean, as we've just discussed, I'm not sure he is. If I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican, etc. Now, Pope Leo, interesting, because he's the first American Pope, and Trump has gone to war before with Pope Francis, and I remember it well. He attacked him after Francis had said he didn't like people who wanted to build walls, not knock them down. He said, well, pretty rich coming from somebody who has a massive wall around the Vatican to protect him, and also made the point that only 20% of Americans are Catholic, so 80% don't care what he has to say, and that he wasn't even American. Well, now he's got an American Pope, and actually 20% of 340 million people is a lot of Americans, many of whom may have voted for Trump. The Pope, interestingly, decided, I'm not having this, and said this.
I have no fear on neither the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel. And that's what I believe I am called to do, what the church is called to do. If we're not politicians, we're not looking to make foreign policy, as he calls it, with the same perspective that he might understand it. But I do believe with the message of the gospel, blessed are the peacemakers, is a message that the world needs to hear.
John Fugelsang, he also said, I thought really significantly, I'm not afraid of the Trump administration. It was a real statement of, you can abuse me all you want, but you're not going to knock me off my message, which is one of peace, and that wars are bad and you shouldn't be killing people.
Yeah, I mean, look, Pope Leo's boss got executed and came back from the dead 3 days later. He's not afraid of a Truth Social post. And what we see here are one man who's quoting Jesus and one man who can't stop fighting with Jesus. The Pope is saying, don't bomb civilians. And somehow that's become controversial. You know, there's two...
Yes, it is controversial. The concept of a pope running the United States of America is controversial. It's originally founded on the idea of the pope killing Native Americans through manifest destiny. And its entire notion of the pope having any opinion about warfare when they are the ones who enacted the most warfare across the world historically is incredibly stupid. Their entire industry is just fake morality built upon this idea that they know more than the other person. That's the American white Ayatollah. That's someone who has no right to speak about political science. And I'm not even someone who supports the war in Iran, but his following base and his perception of reality is what led to the genocide and slaughtering of the Islamic faith to begin with. These people do not know what they are talking about. They are completely moronic. These are white men trying to use the concept of theology that none of them have studied because they should know that in America we hate the concept of religion messing with our state. This is a very basic notion of what is running in this country. That Native Americans were personally slaughtered and genocided by the Pope's edict and the indoctrination of Catholic faith. The people who follow the Catholic Church are no different than the evangelical Christians they criticize. Just screaming peace upon the world does not get you peace upon the world. They are still within the bounds of Italy, which is a fascistic state. They have fascist leaders there. They're just a religious therapeutic center. The fact they have any influence in the world upsets me because if you study the history of the Pope and the Catholic Church, they scream peace just to enact war again. They are not peaceful people. They are the colonists. They are the genociders. They are the ones who grant only whites in first and then the black and brown later. They're in a fascistic country as we speak. They have fascist leaders who are proud of Mussolini and quote him all the time. Fascinating ideology. I promise you these people don't know what they're talking about. They will enact the next genocide and tell you, don't worry, we said don't hurt the gays, don't hurt the black or brown. But you defended yourself, and God bless. Because they'll have some ideology if like some Latino, God forbid, strikes and kills tons of people. They'll say that the manifest destiny was justified and they'll have their own discussions because they'll be so brutally honest about their peace that they won't tell you that they're trying to conform the Africans into a Christian ideology or a Catholic one so that they can enact an imperial invasion upon their lands again. And there's a religious war between the Islamic people and the Christian and Catholics in there, of which African people are suffering. There are Catholics in South America and Latin America that they have missionaries out there to convert, only to have them bombed and killed by the people of which they also taught Catholicism to, because the practice of peace is not something that they are pushing for. They are pushing for more donations. They are pushing for more following of their church. And this is something that the Christians warned you a long time ago with Luther doctrines. These people want donations. They want you to support them so you follow their morality. And their morality is something that is so momentary that it's something that they tell you to don't forget to donate to their tills for. They went bankrupt at one time and they magically got millions of dollars from billionaires and millionaires giving them money. They're not a real institution of faith or religion. If you're living in the 20th century, they are something that is just known as a therapeutic center that scams people for money. They are no different than a cult that all of these people make fun of because a cult is still a leader that's alive and their leader is a pope, which if you study their theology, they will tell you he has a direct line to God itself. These people are out of their mind by tokenizing the pope to argue with American politics. The American system would slaughter a pope before they ever let a religious leader dictate what we do with our laws or our morality here in America. Because they've done it historically. The English, the Spanish, the French, and now the United States of America. I promise you they do not care for that religious leader. That religious leader does what they're told, and they will do it every single time because they love their donations. They love their unyielding support of fanaticism and Zionist psychopaths that kill and slaughter in their name because all they have to do after the blood's drenched their feet and drenched their hands is God forgive me. You forget where this murderous ideology comes from and where it is rooted from. They grant themselves forgiveness from a white leader. They do not grant themselves forgiveness because of the morality dictated it so.
Kinds of Christianity, and there always has been since Rome took over Jesus's operation. There are the Christ followers who actually believe in following the words and commandments of Jesus Christ, humility, caring for the less fortunate, welcoming the stranger. Individuals and nations have to care for the poor and the sick and put away your sword. And then you've got the Christian nationalist strain that's existed since Rome took over, where they believe they own God, they own Jesus, and they work for us. And anything we do is okay because God likes us better. And Donald Trump has harnessed that energy quite well for quite a long time. And now
he described basic Darwinism, by the way. He described that we own God is the concept that there is no God, and that the concept of God itself is enacted between your hands, your feet, and your eyes and your mouth, and it's the will of God that flows through you. He dictated that. These people who are Christian, I promise you, even if they weren't Christian or Jewish or some other religion, they would humiliate you, stab you, treat you like garbage, threaten to kill you, and then make fun of you as they tell themselves they are morally higher than you. These people would record your humiliation and mock you to your suicide and to your murder until they push you to the lowest levels of society and they sieg heil to their leader of the Catholic Church or to the Jewish faith they have. These people are the most disgusting animals of society. They are the pale-skinned animal invader colonists. They are white devils by definition, and by practice they are hardly human. We just deem them human by the blood and the DNA we have enacted through science to define that they are human to us as scientists. They are not the people of which we should be following. They are filth.
He's overshot the mark. All Leo is doing is literally Christianity 101. And Donald Trump seems to think that's political. Starting a war, threatening genocide, bragging about it online. I mean, Leo's not the one launching missiles. He's the only guy in this argument who hasn't killed anybody yet. And so I loved Leo's response. And all he's doing is modeling what the gospel actually says, which infuriates Christian nationalists.
Right. Dan Abrams, we've got to an extraordinary place. I mean, there's so many extraordinary things that have happened in the last 6 weeks, but the new Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, posted today, His Holiness Pope Leo, I condemn the insult to your excellency on behalf of the great nation of Iran and declare that the desecration of Jesus, the prophet of peace and brotherhood, is not acceptable to any free person. I wish you glory by Allah. I mean, when the Iranian president is racing to support an American pope, the first American pope, against an onslaught from the American president, who is the head of a party which historically has more Christian voters than any other in America. What is happening?
Well, the question becomes why, right? Why would he do this?
Right.
And look, you'll have some people on the right who will say, well, we disagree with what the Pope says. Well, we support the president's actions and the Pope doesn't. Okay. But that doesn't mean you got to go after the Pope, right? You can disagree with the things that he's saying and not call him, weak, and then make it all about himself, this idea that, the Pope only got his job because of me. He's talking about the stock market in this response to the Pope. You have to ask yourself, what is the goal? It's sort of similar to what we were talking about with regard to Iran. What is the goal? What are you trying to achieve? Why are you doing it? You can disagree, you can be mad at him, you can be upset. There's a way to deal with it. And putting aside all of the religious side that John has talked about, even from a human and political perspective, you have to ask yourself, why is he doing it?
Right, so I've known Trump 20 years. It was 20 years ago I took part in his Celebrity Apprentice show. We've been good friends over the years. We had a couple of wobbles, but largely good friends. I've spoken to him maybe a dozen times since he won second time round. So no, I've known him well and a long time. I just think his behaviour is the most erratic I've ever seen. I don't think you can hide behind, well, he's always like this, he likes to... It's more than that. It's almost, he's like he's on some weird frenzied mission now to just piss off as many people as he can humanly do for reasons that I don't... When you put it in totality, it's like, as you said, what is the end game? It does raise a spectre, which, of course, the Democrats are gleefully putting forward because, of course, it was raised about Joe Biden. But Hillary Clinton posted today, Trump has become fully unhinged, and we should talk about it. On MS Now this morning, she elaborated, I read these posts, like the majority of Americans, shaking my head and really just feeling sick that we had a president who is such a disgrace. What do you think, Dan? I mean, you've obviously observed Trump for a very long time too. Is he showing signs of behaviour so erratic that there should be legitimate questions asked about his cognitive abilities.
Right. So you got to separate out unhinged from, quote, mentally ill, right? I see a lot of people publicly diagnosing Trump as if everyone's sort of a doctor, right? Oh, he's mentally ill. I don't know. I do know that the posts and the responses are a bit unhinged. So I think when people start saying things like, oh, we got to deal with the 25th Amendment now, that's not productive, right? There is going to be no 25th Amendment that is going to action that the cabinet is going to take to remove Donald Trump, right? The 25th Amendment was basically enacted to deal with a president who's comatose, okay? It's not going to apply. But that doesn't mean you can't talk about what he's saying and how unhinged it seems. The remedy is not 25th Amendment. The remedy is Congress, right? Congress is supposed to be the one in a system of checks and balances saying you can or can't do this, and in the worst cases, impeachment. But at the very least, you would think when it comes to Iran, based on what we've seen, that Congress would be able to pass some sort of legislation to say, you got to go through us first. It can't just be the president who's doing it. And it seems up to this point, Congress can't even do that.
Yeah. Vinny, if I was Donald Trump, and I'm very thankful I'm not, I'm sure he is too, but if I was, the sheer volume of people that have been broadly pretty supportive of me, particularly second time around, that are now turning on him. And it's not just conservatives. You've got the Tuckers and the Megyn Kellys and the Candace Owens, Alex Jones. But you've also got Joe Rogan, Theo Von, hugely influential podcasters. 70 million people watched Trump's interview with Joe Rogan before the election. It probably helped get him over the line with young men. People like me, that like I say, I've always got on well with Trump. I try to always be fair-minded with him, criticise him when I don't agree, praise him when I do. But the last 6 weeks just felt like we're on this weird spiraling roller coaster, culminating, I'll be honest, when I read the thing about, wanting to wipe out an entire civilization, I was really appalled by that. I just thought this is just a brazen statement of intent about potentially committing an act of genocide against the Iranian people. And then you look at the logic of this, which was his fury was because the Straits of Hormuz weren't being opened. And now today, he is the one trying to actively close them, albeit for reasons that some people think are, quite smart, potentially strategically. But none of it makes sense, Vinny. But there's a growing number of people that were pro-Trump who are now turning on him. And a lot of it is being driven by this whole Iran war and his behavior surrounding him.
I agree, Piers. I was one of those people, 2016, in California, supporting him from day one. I love what he did. He came and mixed up the whole system. I got punched in the head in California for wearing a red hat that wasn't even a Make America Great Again hat. So I was there with them for the beginning. But again, a lot of people, Piers, try to say, no, you guys are all MAGA, you never change your mind. I'll openly say that what's happening right now is unlike him. It's almost like he has like an evil force around him. I don't know if it's the Paula Whites, these evangelical Christians in his ear. But I love what John said, Piers, about, the sad thing is, I'm not surprised about I don't agree with it. These tweets about the Pope and Christianity, and by the way, and I'm pretty sure John knows this, Galatians 6:7 says, God will not be mocked. But I'm not surprised. He said he's not a Christian, Piers. When he got sworn in, he didn't put his hand on the Bible this time. He said on Air Force One he's not going to heaven. I just don't. It's supposed to be America first, Piers. It's supposed to be America number one, okay? And it just seems like there's outside influences, Piers, that are more about them and less about us. And it's a really, really messed up thing because, Piers, look around the corner. Midterms look like it's going to be a bloodbath. And then think about 2028 presidential, who the front runner, technically right now, is Marco Rubio. This war does not seem like it's going to end, Piers, anytime soon, period. There's no uprising. We dropped weapons off to the Kurds. The Kurds took the guns. The Kurds stole the weapons. There's no uprising. And I know I said at the beginning, Piers, this was told it was for the people. The Iranians, after 47 years, took to the streets, and they were like, we need help. Please help us. We are done. And the president, everybody was like, we're coming to help. We're coming to help. And then all of a sudden, enriched uranium became the story again, which I think is nonsense. We took it out. And the fact that we're supposed to believe intelligence, that now their missiles can come here, I don't believe it, Piers. I think we were hijacked, and we all know who hijacked it. And Israel has its thing. By the way, Piers, I'm watching videos of they're going after Hezbollah right now in Lebanon. They're taking down full apartment complexes for what? For one terrorist? For two terrorists? Yeah. It's not good, Piers. And I just hope, I think we're at the point of no return, Piers. I don't see this thing ending anytime soon. I think it's going to hurt the Republican Party, not only in the midterms, but for the presidency as well.
So Fred Flights, when you hear that from somebody who, was a Trump voter, does that not give you pause for concern? And when you hear the same from so many people that were supportive of Trump, that voted for him in the last election, turning on him so rapidly in such large numbers now, does that not worry you?
I don't think they're turning on him in large numbers, but I want to add that I'm Catholic. I like Pope Leo. I don't agree with him. He's a little too liberal for me, but I expect popes to advocate for peace and against war. And I would advise the president to keep that in mind. This is what popes do. It's a good thing. But I just look at what the NATO Secretary General said.
So would you criticize Donald Trump for his attack on the Pope?
I just don't care about this. What I would focus on is that
as a Catholic,
the NATO Secretary General said,
as a Catholic, you don't care about the American president launching an unprecedented verbal onslaught against the first American Pope. You don't care?
It's a distraction. It's a distraction. I just don't care.
But as a Catholic,
what I care
you
is
don't
that the
care?
NATO Secretary
I'm a
General
Catholic
says
sitting in London.
our world
I
is
care.
safer.
It's hilarious how a lot of these Catholics are essentially people who believe in magic God, and they shame other people the same way a Muslim would shame a woman for not wearing a hijab, and they will shame them to a complete oblivion, saying, how dare you not care for this random Italian man who is American, but he's Italian in nationality. It's so ridiculous how their loyalty toward a magic God is still. These same people would enact just crimes against humanity, against Islam, and call them terrorists and monsters, and then they'll turn around when it's too much and say that they're showing mercy for only killing some and not all. I've heard that same narrative for the Native Americans in the United States when they slaughtered the majority of them and told them we spared some, it's Jesus Christ's mercy. What is this complete capitulation to a pope? It's gross. You really start to see how a lot of these bigoted white men who oftentimes will go around virtue signaling their whole lives, and they'll approve the strikes and murders of Islamic people, and then once they're done slaughtering them, they'll come back here to their own countries, whether it's the United Kingdom or the United States, and then they'll just continuously slaughter and push down people of color, and then pretend like that's not just the worst thing they've done. They're not changing their own countries to any better for mercy. They've enacted a war against skin color, and they've never surrendered ever since. These white liberals don't care about people of color. I don't know why they are suddenly shaming the Catholics for not listening to the Pope, when none of them followed even the goddamn Bible. Where's any of their belief systems of following the Bible? Or following mercy in their sense when they're talking about refugees, or they're talking about people of color taking their burdening their housing, or taking down their new culture of which now there's gay people or transsexuals nearby because their mercy ran out the second it started to affect their neighborhood. Suddenly the Pope's word doesn't matter when it's in their neighborhood. It's strange to me how this morality that these white men have, and they shame each other for it in order to put on this smug look as if they know what's better for humanity by following the same doctrines of mercy that slaughtered Native Americans, by saying we're showing you mercy by killing you, we're showing you mercy by giving you segregation, we're showing you mercy because even though we slaughtered and killed you and segregated you into the smallest populations, at least we did not kill you all, and we ended the slaughter by killing only some of you, not all of you. This mercy they share with this identity of Catholicism, or even Christianity for that matter, is just a continuation of what you're lucky you're still alive, boy. You're lucky we still see you as a human, boy. You're lucky you're still alive here listening to me speak to you in a country I made for you, boy. It's insane to me that their sudden care, their sudden mercy and humanity is like putrid vile from their mouth after the slaughtering of the Palestinians and after the slaughtering of the Middle East for 40 years. They suddenly just look at this as though they are morally righteous enough to know what's right and wrong. They are the same white people that had to learn from the black man by beating him till you saw his skin and flesh and fat from his body leak out his body, and watch the slaves drown themselves in the river. And it is not until after they are dead that they suddenly think that they should show some mercy. What is this concept of caring about human beings when they are throwing them to homelessness and slaughtering them? They don't care about human life. They pretend to and virtue signal for views, for money, from resource to get an invite to Piers Morgan's show. They don't care about the human life and concepts of what it means to be sentiently alive in a country of which white men have predominantly dominated for centuries with their lies of mercy and their lies of acceptance of other races, while they only want to exploit you for your labor and your wealth and your cuisine because at least you gave them something good to eat and that was taxes well paid for. They even ward for the spice, for God's sake, and you think these people are good. You think their nature is humane, when they have taught you nothing but the inhumane, animalistic nature of the imperialist dogs they are.
Our world is safer because of the U.S. and
Yeah, but
Israeli action.
Fred, no disrespect, but just to repeat, you don't care?
I think it's a distraction. I said, look, I
You can
like the
still
Pope. He's
care
a little
about
too
it.
liberal for me. I expect him to speak out on war and peace. That's what popes do.
But you can still
he
care.
Did enter the, he did enter the political debate, and this is the kind of thing
Well,
that
your
happens when you
spiritual
do that.
leader is described in the way that Donald Trump described him, and he's the first American pope. Your only response is, I don't care?
Look, Trump trolls people. You know that better than anyone
but he's
else.
trolling your spiritual leader and mine. I care.
What I care about is that Trump is winning this war. The world is safer because an Islamist terrorist state is significantly weaker. And I think this war is going to wrap up in a couple of weeks. And I think there will be an uprising over the next few months when the
Do you want
bombing
to bet
stops.
on that?
Yeah, let's do it. I'll come back on your show if that happens.
Okay. How much do you want to bet?
$50.
$50. That probably represents. That probably represents your confidence in winning this bet. John Fugelsang, I mean, I look, as a Catholic sitting here in London at the moment, I care. I absolutely bloody well care, because this was an unprecedented attack. And it's the first American Pope. And it's like, at the very, this is my problem with what Donald Trump does in these things. It's like when people he doesn't like die. Whether it's Colin Powell or John McCain or Rob Ryan or whoever it may be. It's like, my mother always says to me, nothing good to say about someone when they die. Say nothing. Just at least respect life and death. Say nothing.
Most men have the game to not do that. But again, we have to remember, this man can't stop lying. There is no Jesus-based argument for Trump support. There is no gospel teaching or commandment of Jesus that he has fought for on a policy level. You have to throw Jesus out. And if you think this Pope is too liberal, you're going to really hate Jesus when you get to the gospel parts of the Bible. I mean, this is a man who began his political career off a racist lie that the first black president wasn't one of us. He lied to every American you care and love about during a plague. He had cops beaten for a lie on the Capitol steps and then pardoned all those terrorists after he got in a second time. And he launched that campaign off a lie, another racist lie about Haitian migrants being illegals eating pets. You cannot believe anything he says. And again, you can't believe Netanyahu or the Ayatollahs either. If anything, this shows us that it's not the moderate and liberal religious people causing all the problems. It is the fundamentalist wings of all the world's great religions, the fundamentalist extreme right, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, who are causing the violence, oppressing the women, hating the gays, and turning millions of young people off to the concept of religion.
Dan Abrams, just very
Piers,
quickly.
Piers, let me just add something there about Israel, right? We've been talking sort of broadly about Israel as if it's a monolith, right? And I think John makes a good point, which is if you look at support for Netanyahu right now in Israel, it's at about 40%, right? Yep. Similar to what Trump has here in the United States. And when we talk about Trump's actions, right, here in the United States, we separate Trump from the United States. And I think we have to do the same thing with Israel. Which is we have to identify Netanyahu as the one who is pursuing this. It doesn't mean Israel Israel that.
Listen, I totally agree. What I would say to that,
I
completely agree. I've become increasingly critical of the Israeli government because I believe there are some absolute right-wing headbangers on that government. Ben Gvir, Smodrich, the spectacular Ben Gvir last week, cracking champagne open in the Knesset and wearing noose lapel badges because he just celebrated a law which will only execute Palestinians if they determine a terrorist, but not Israelis who do the same. I thought it was one of the most revolting things I've seen. So I think that you can criticise the Israeli government without, as some are always keen to do, being branded anti-Semitic. It's got nothing to do with the country, actually, or nothing to do with the people, and certainly nothing to do with Jewish people. But, and it's a big but, I think I'm right in saying that although the polling on Netanyahu is at that level, the polling on Israeli support within Israel for the war is very high, very high. So Netanyahu knows that, and he also knows the longer he can keep the sort of war part of his reign, as I use that word deliberately, going, the longer he avoids a criminal corruption trial.
Yep. Right. I think that's true. All of that is true. And I will just add one other piece here, which is this sense, and this goes back to the New York Times article, et cetera, this idea that, Trump got convinced into this and his team was, again, we talk about it as if Trump is like a child, right? It's like, he got convinced by Netanyahu and Netanyahu snookered him. It's like, what other president would we talk about this way? This is a decision that Donald Trump made, blaming it all on Netanyahu. Netanyahu this and Israel that. Yes. Is that a piece of it? Sure. But in the end, this is Donald Trump's decision. He's now owning it. He's the one telling us it wasn't Netanyahu who convinced him. He's the one telling us it was his decision. So I just think it's a deflection for people who say, Netanyahu or Israel or this convinced Trump of this or that. He made this decision and now he's got to live with it.
Well, talking of deflections, just very quickly, hang on, Benny, I will give you one word, but Dan, just very quickly, I'm about to interview somebody who was an advisor to Melania Trump. She suddenly popped up out of nowhere last week to make this, again, unprecedented statement about Jeffrey Epstein. Let's take a look.
I am not Epstein's victim. Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump. I met my husband by chance at a New York City party in 1998. This initial encounter with my husband is documented in detail in my book, Melania.
Dan, very quickly, before I talk to Mark Beckman, who is a current advisor to Melania Trump, what was your take on that? Why do you think she did that?
You have to believe she did that because there's some upcoming story. Because if there isn't, it makes no sense, right? If she literally just got up and decided, you know what, I'm now getting tired of this, and resurrects the Epstein story, it doesn't make any sense. The only thing I can think of is her office was getting calls about some bigger story that's being done about her contact with Ghislaine Maxwell and with Jeffrey Epstein, and she decided to get ahead of the story because otherwise it's inexplicable.
Yeah. Final word to you, Vinny, very quickly, because I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just really quick. We're not blaming Israel for everything, but if you can't admit that this all started because Israel was going, so Marco Rubio said, we have to go. Miriam Adelson is a huge Israeli sponsor. She gave him $100 million. And name one leader from another country that has visited the White House 7 times in 1 year. And when it comes to Congress, he has 100.
I'm sorry.
He's not doing that. He's not blaming the Jews.
I'm not blaming.
He is not.
It's so tiresome to hear this.
Don't play that game. Please,
it's
please
not a
don't
game.
play
It's
the blame the
outrageous.
Jews
You
game.
actually,
It's like blaming all Christians for the KKK. He's not blaming Jews.
Unfortunately, when somebody, Fred, all due respect, Fred, but when you say blame the Jews, at no stage has anybody blamed the Jews, right? We have specifically just made it clear that we are criticizing the Israeli government.
What's happening?
By the way,
Miriam Adelson.
Hold on.
Sorry,
hold on. So you mean to tell me if somebody gives you $100 million, you're not going to lean to what they want? Are you crazy? And by the way, I'm a Semite, Piers. I'm Assyrian. So don't play this whole anti-Semitic. That argument is done, and people have woken up to it. Don't play that game with me, please.
Yeah, look.
Don't go down that route.
Look,
it's undeniable
you don't
the
have to say
influence.
but again, the whoever, right?
Come on.
Blame Miriam Adelson. Whatever Miriam Adelson is nonsense. This idea that, oh, she's the real reason, right? And I think that's sort of the point that Fred is making, putting aside whether you blame the Jews, not to blame, the reality of blaming this Miriam Adelson or these pro-Israel supporters who have access to Trump. Again, the idea that it's their fault.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right?
I agree. If you're the president, if you are the most powerful commander in chief in the world and the most powerful world leader, ultimately and you go to war, the buck stops with you. It is certainly true from what Rubio initially said and from the New York Times piece that Trump was put under an enormous amount of pressure by Netanyahu and the Israeli government because they painted a picture of a sequence of events that simply hasn't materialized. But ultimately, you're quite right, Dan. If you're the president of the United States, it's on you. It's on you where you take American military. I've got to leave it there. A fascinating debate. Thank you.
I'm gonna finish the cover here. They're gonna interview the Melania Trump's advisor. I don't care what he has to say. It was a very interesting discussion. It brought back a lot of memories of dealing with a lot of Catholics growing up, a lot of Christians that spew their nonsense, constantly saying they're more righteous than the next person. They are not righteous. They are barely understanding of morality. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe.